Thanks for tuning in to Witch Wednesdays with Steph for a chat about a new witchcraft topic every Wednesday morning. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and you're listening to episode 68, Finding and Working with Deities. If you haven't noticed from the new introduction, Tara is taking a step back from her hosting duties. We mentioned this on a previous update episode and over on Instagram that she will possibly step back in for some guest, hosting times, but for the most part, she's going to be taking a step back. I took a poll over on Instagram about whether you would want to hear from just me or if I should get guest hosts for each episode or a mix of the two. And the overwhelming majority selected a mix of the two. So I definitely appreciate that you're willing to listen to just what I have to say. This particular episode about finding and working with deities was already planned and ready to go. And I'm, confident in talking about this subject matter. But for future episodes where I'm not as confident or it's possibly more Wiccan based, I will try to find guest hosts that are interested in that topic. And I know a lot of you listeners have your own witchcraft related businesses, whether that is podcasting, blogging, Etsy shops, things like that. So if you are interested in guest hosting, you have a particular subject matter that hasn't been discussed and you think would make a great podcast topic, then definitely reach out and let me know. You can contact on Gmail, send me an email anytime. That's witchwednesdays@gmail.com, or reach out on Instagram, Witch Wednesdays Podcast. And all of these links and more can be found on the website, witchwednesdays.com. So today, getting into finding and working with deities. Your craft should not be a stressful part of your life. We've talked about that many times, and that obviously includes your relationship or lack thereof with a god or goddess. Today, I'm going to dig a little more into this subject to learn whether you need a patron or matron deity. That's a very popular phrase lately. Why you might want one, and how to go about finding the one that's right for you. And I didn't include this in season 1 because it's not beginner witchcraft. You really should know about your own, raising your own energy and about your own practice, including things like protections, banishings, etc., before working with deities. Because if you just start out working straight with deities and relying on them for your practice, you're never going to be able to develop those skills on your own. So that's why I don't consider it exactly beginner witchcraft. Not that it's particularly difficult to work with deities, but just that you need to know yourself and your type of practice and, what you are looking for out of the relationship before you enter into one. So let's start at the beginning of what is a deity or pantheon. Like we talked about in the Wiccan deities episode, a deity is a god. It's Zeus or even Yahweh. Anything that is considered a god or goddess is a deity. They come from many cultures all around the world, and a collection of the gods and goddesses in one culture is called a pantheon. The Greek pantheon is one of the most well-known, and that includes Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Apollo, Aphrodite, etc. But witches often work with the Roman, Norse, Egyptian, and Celtic pantheons too, to name a few. And to name even more, that was the point of doing the Pagan Paths episode before this one. So the main question is, do you need a deity? Absolutely not. You do not have to work with a god or goddess to be an effective witch. The truth is that your magic doesn't come from anywhere. It's not coming from some higher power outside of you. Every single person on this planet was born with the capacity to access and harness this innate magical energy that we all have. So if you're sort of struggling to make your witchcraft work right now, it's not because of this lack of power or lack of deity work that's causing a struggle. It's just lack of knowledge. So that is why I recommend knowing yourself and your practice and really understanding energy work and knowing how to utilize it before jumping into deity work. So if you're seeking to be more powerful, you don't really want to look towards any external source to grant you that power. You just need to start studying and practicing. So a deity relationship is like any other relationship where you can't get your needs met outside of that relationship, then it becomes this sort of breeding ground for this unbalanced dynamic. So you definitely want to understand your own needs and your own practice first. Another common misconception I want to touch on before getting into why you want to work with a deity is the question of working with both a god or goddess. It's a very common idea that if you work with a god, then you also need to work with a corresponding goddess or vice versa. And this idea of maintaining this equal gender balance between deities is very Wiccan. It's not particularly relevant to anybody outside of, a beginner Wiccan practice. If you like the idea of working with both a god and goddess, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's not mandatory that you choose one of each. Obviously, if gender is something that matters significantly to you, that's perfectly fine. You can structure your relationships that in any way that make you feel comfortable. But if that means only working with goddesses or only working with gods, that's fine. And there are very much gods that are in between or entirely off the gender spectrum. So it's not going to, make your spells turn out poorly because you don't have this perfect balance of masculine and feminine energy. That is completely just a myth and unique to your own personal practice. You just choose what works best for you. So why would you want to work with a deity doll? It's very important to understand that working with a deity is different than honoring or worshiping them. That is one thing that is very hard to get past for beginner witches coming from an Abrahamic religious background, because that is all about worshiping the deity. But in a witchcraft practice, it's really a working relationship. And there are benefits and drawbacks to working with deities in general. And these pros and cons definitely need to be carefully considered before entering into a relationship with any being. And you need to know what you are hoping to get out of the relationship and how much you're willing to put in. It's very much like any other relationship with a human being, that it requires a certain amount of time and attention to build trust and closeness. And as with any relationship, it should be reciprocal. You should be getting something out of your deity relationship. This is why we've often talked about, if you're going to ask the fae for something, to be careful and leave the offerings that you promise that they're going to offer, because it's just like any other relationship, and deities are the same. Anyone that you know in your life, you don't just go up and ask a stranger on the street for a big favor. They don't know you. They're not going to give it to you because you haven't, established any sort of trust and connection with them. So it is really important to understand what you want and understand how much work you're willing to put in, because it varies between deities of what they're going to ask of you. And if you don't have a lot of time and attention to put forth to it, you really have to consider carefully who you are willing to work with. The possibilities of what you can get out of a relationship are assistance with your magical workings, emotional support, help in your general pursuit of witchcraft learning, advice and direction whenever you seek it, and many more options. Everything is so personal. Every relationship between yourself and deities are going to be different, because just like different people, gods and goddesses are individuals. We did talk about the Wiccan belief and a lot of pagan beliefs that these spokes of god and goddesses are coming out of like one main wheel hub. So it's just one energy, and all these different gods and goddesses come off of that one energy. So they're all faces of the same god, but that is one way to look at it. Don't have to. But even if you do believe that it all comes down to the same thing, each of those facets is very different. They all have their own personalities, likes, dislikes, and talents. So each one will be able to offer you something completely different. And even beyond that, of course, you are also an individual. So your relationship with a deity is going to be entirely different from the relationship that another person has with that same deity. Essentially, you should go into any deity relationship with an understanding that the relationship that you build with them is entirely unique to you. So what you give them and what they give you is going to be unique to your relationship. The same idea as getting into a relationship with a romantic partner, you need to know the qualities that you're looking for before you even start. And you have to have a good idea of the kind of relationship you want before you start introducing yourself to deities. And this is important for two major reasons. First, by knowing what you're looking for out of that relationship, you can narrow down your potential options when you're researching these different deities, because there's obviously a lot. Try to, talk about pagan paths to narrow down your options and give you an idea of where to start looking, but there are a lot. But for example, if death still freaks you out, a lot of people feel that way, then working with a death god or goddess is not going to be in your best interest. So no point in even researching down that path. If you are really interested in working with a deity to further your magical growth, then deities such as Odin or Hecate would really be supportive in that goal. On the flip side, if you are really concerned with home and hearth magic, which is something that we've talked about a lot because hearth magic is very incorporated into what I do on a daily basis, then there are goddesses like Freya and Bridget that we talked about in the past that are really associated with hearth and home that would be a better fit for you, and on and on. And second, if you don't know what kind of relationship you're looking for, then you're very likely to end up in the wrong one and settle for the very first thing that you come across. And relationships that begin like this very rarely end well. If you don't know what you're looking for or what you're willing to give, you don't have that necessary discernment to find a deity who works well with you. And deities are just as capable of being manipulative and taking advantage of a person as any other spiritual being. I mean, we talked about it with Fae mostly, but deities are the same way. I think of the trickster god, Loki. So they can easily manipulate you. And you don't want to be caught in that situation just because you don't know what you're looking for before you go into it. You really want to set your boundaries and know what you will and won't accept in a relationship before you dive in. So let's shift gears then and talk about how you should even approach deity work, which I know is what you're all looking for, is what do I even do and how do I even find one? And when I am interested in one, how do I even contact them? So obviously focus on your witchcraft first and foremost, because again, your source of power is you and the deity thing comes second. So the best way to sort of go about finding these deities that would work well with your practice is mind mapping. If you've never done mind mapping before, it's just getting a piece of paper and a pen and writing out this exactly the same way you would create a vision board or your goals for the year, any associations that you would like the deity to have and what you would like them to teach you. This could be a whole variety of things, and you shouldn't limit yourself. Just write whatever comes to mind that you are really interested in witchery and you are struggling with the plants in your area, that you're looking for a deity who, has a green thumb, something like that. Or you need to take better care of your home. You're looking for a hearth deity, that you are interested in the afterlife and processing grief, and you're looking for a deity to help with that. There are a lot of different ways that you can go. Maybe you're looking for love, and there's even within that a lot of different ways to go. That maybe you're looking for romantic love, but you might also be looking for self-love and self-confidence and things like that. Those would all be different deities that you could potentially work with. You may want to use divination techniques to help with this, like drawing tarot or oracle cards, because those are really good for alerting you to anything that you might be missing on your list or things that you should look out for. Or alternatively, they could reinforce what you already wrote down. If they match something on your list, you know that you're heading in the right direction. From that mind map, you really want to pull out the keywords and, circle the things that are most important to you, anything that's in common, any common threads there, and then just begin researching which gods have those associations. A Google search will tell you everything that you need to know. Just deity plus love, or goddess plus hearth, something along those lines. If and when you find a deity that matches those associations that interests you, just do a deep dive into researching them. learn all about their myths and folklore. Again, a Google search will definitely help you here, but heading to your local library and checking out a book on Greek mythology and doing a deep dive on that, learn about the cultures that they came from, research how modern practitioners work and with them and read what they have to say about their relationships with that deity. Obviously, yours is going to be different, but there are so many great YouTubers out there that talk about deity work and specifically their relationships that they have with those deities. And yours will be different, but you can get a lot of good information about the kinds of things that those deities are helping them with. And this is really all that's required for a lot of people to make contact with a deity, because showing this level of interest will often cause the god or goddess to take notice and introduce themselves to you. So if that happens, then congratulations, you met your first deity. But if not, that's perfectly fine. Not every deity is so forthcoming. Some take a little more to get to know them, and they want to see you put even more effort in than that. And also, not every person is going to recognize how a deity is attempting to communicate with them right away. That's something that comes with practice, especially if you are not used to working with the spiritual realm. If you're not great at noticing those things yet, it's something that comes with time when something is trying to communicate with you or contact you in some way. It's just something that you sort of pick up with your practice. As you practice more and these things happen more, then you really start connecting with it. Some people are just innately more in tune with this, and for some of us it takes a little bit more work, but you will get there eventually. You might need to just sit down and hold a personal ritual to introduce yourself before a deity starts making contact with you or before you start recognizing it. And that really can be anything. That can be researching and then taking the book that you used, set it on your altar, and sit there and just introduce yourself in a way that you would introduce yourself to any new person that you meet. Say, hello, Aphrodite, my name is Stephanie, and I would really like to work with you. Here are some things about me and what I'm looking for, and here's what I've learned about you and why we think we would be a good fit, like a job interview. And that's a good way to get them to make that significant contact with you. If you have any questions about that, definitely reach out. If you have any questions about a god or goddess in particular, then I highly recommend the Discord community, because there are a broad range of deities that all of those witches in that community work with. So it'd be a really good resource to get started and say, maybe I'm having trouble getting this one to contact me, and I'd really like to work with them. What did you do? What kind of offerings did you leave? What are some of their likes and dislikes? And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on for you to keep in mind is that even when you've started working with a deity, it is completely within your rights to set boundaries, to renegotiate the terms of your relationship, and if necessary, end the relationship. Because just because a god or goddess gives you attention, it doesn't mean that you are shackled to them forever. That is not how it works. And a lot of people coming from Christian backgrounds struggle with this, but it's like any other relationship in your life, that you are not shackled to them forever. Some people come in and out of your life at different seasons for different reasons, and deity work is very similar to that. You can, and do the introduction ritual and meet the deity, and then decide, within a month that relationship is not working out. You can respectfully tell them that it's not working out and just cut off communication. Or several months later, you might decide that you want to renegotiate the terms. That works fine too. You can say, I am not able to give as much time and energy and offerings as I was before, because the things in my life have changed, and I understand that you might not be able to help me as much, but I still want to have, a smaller relationship with you. Just communicate that, because as with any relationship, it should be a two-way street. You should both be giving and receiving. And once you start to doing this, you will get better at it. But again, I understand if you come from a religious background, you're not used to getting answers in that way or or getting that direct sort of help like that, it is a little bit, takes a little bit of getting used to, but you really should both be listening and being heard. Because if you are not being heard or not being worked with in the ways that you need, then you need to consider your own best interests and recognize that that's not a good relationship, and then move on and find different deities to work with. Some people will find their deity right away and consider their matron or patron deity just their one sponsor that they work with, above all others, that they consider their closest working relationship. Some people will never find that patron or matron deity. They'll just have a bunch that they work with and have relationships with back and forth throughout their lives, maybe more in one point than another. But it's completely okay to redefine those relationships, move on if you need to, and know that it's a lifelong process and can change. You may jump in and tomorrow find a matron deity that you work with for the next 10 years and then find it's not working anymore and completely change it. All of those things are perfectly okay options. There are a lot of different ways that you can undertake deity practice and have it unique to your own witchcraft and change that as your practice changes. And of course, I always say, definitely not necessary, and not necessary all the time, and not necessary for every spell. You may not need a deity for every magical working that you do, and you may not need them at all. Every practice is so completely different. So if you have anything to add or any questions, then definitely check out Instagram and Discord. We'll be over there having a discussion today. Hopefully that answers a lot of your basic questions about working with deities and the idea of matrons and patrons and what all of those different things mean. But if there are any more questions or you need a second follow-up to this episode, then definitely let me know and we can make that happen. And that is all I have for you this week. And next week, I will be back for a chat about cauldrons and using cauldrons, setting it up for the first time, because if you did not see in the Beltane boxes, there is a mini cauldron included in each box, and it is actually a cast iron, so can be used in your practice in the traditional way. They're so adorable. So definitely wanted to include a cauldrons episode to help you use that and get it ready for Beltane. That is all I have for you this week. I will see you next week. Need even more witchcraft? Subscribe to Patreon for exclusive bonus content 3 times a week and order Sabbath boxes and other supplies at witchwednesdays.com. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast.